Check, check, mic check. Check, check, mic check. It's fading out. That's not too bad. Alright. So I'm going to try to read through Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas in one go. Just with some random royalty-free music in the background. Some visuals. It's like 8:15 p.m. It's 200 pages. Might take me till 4 in the morning. Is this right side up? I want to show some illustrations in this from time to time. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Savage journey to the heart of the American dream. To Bob Geiger, for reasons that need not be explained here, and to Bob Dylan, for Mr. Tambourine Man. He who makes a beast of himself gets rid of the pain of being a man. Dr. Johnson. Part 1. We're somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold. I remember saying something like, "I feel a bit lightheaded. Maybe you should drive." And suddenly there was a terrible roar all around us, and the sky was full of what looked like huge bats, all swooping and screeching and diving around the car, which was going about 100 miles an hour with the top down to Las Vegas. And a voice was screaming, "Holy Jesus, what are these goddamn animals?" And it was quiet again. My attorney had taken his shirt off and was pouring beer on his chest to facilitate the tanning process. "What the hell are you yelling about?" he muttered, staring up at the sun with his eyes closed and covered with wraparound Spanish sunglasses. "Never mind," I said. "It's your turn to drive." I hit the brakes and aimed the great red shark toward the shoulder of the highway. No point mentioning those bats, I thought. The poor bastard will see them soon enough. It was almost noon, and we still had more than 100 miles to go. They would be tough miles. Very soon, I knew, we would both be completely twisted. But there was no going back, and no time to rest. We'd have to ride it out. Press registration for the fabulous Mint 400 was already underway. And we had to get there by 4 to claim our soundproof suite. A fashionable sporting magazine in New York had taken care of the reservations, along with this huge red Chevy convertible we'd just rented off a lot on the Sunset Strip. And it was, after all, and I was, after all, a professional journalist, so I had an obligation to cover the story, for good or ill. The sporting editors had also given me $300 in cash, most of which was already spent on extremely dangerous drugs. The trunk of the car looked like a mobile police narcotics lab. We had 2 bags of grass, 75 pellets of mescaline, 5 sheets of high-powered blotter acid, a salt shaker half full of cocaine, and a whole galaxy of multicolored uppers, downers, screamers, laughers, and also a quart of tequila, a quart of rum, a case of Budweiser, a pint of raw ether, and 24 amyls. All this had been rounded up the night before in a frenzy of high-speed driving all over Los Angeles County. You know what? I don't like this music. So hopefully this doesn't get copyright blocked, but if it does, I'll just do this whole video again. I will keep the visuals though from this video. Just want a little bit of background music. Okay. The sporting editors had also given me $300, had an obligation to cover the story, for good or ill. The sporting editors had also given me $300 in cash, most of which was already spent on extremely dangerous drugs. The trunk of the car looked like a mobile police narcotics lab. We had 2 bags of grass, 75 pellets of mescaline, 5 sheets of high-powered blotter acid, 2 dozen apples. All this had been rounded up the night before in a frenzy of high-speed driving all over Los Angeles County, from Topanga to Watts. We picked up everything we could get our hands on. Not that we needed all that for the trip, but once you get locked into a serious drug collection, the tendency is to push it as far as you can. The only thing that really worried me was the ether. There is nothing in the world more helpless and irresponsible and depraved than a man in the depths of an ether bench. And I knew we'd get into that rotten stuff pretty soon, probably at the next gas station. We had sampled almost everything else, and now, yes, it was time for a long snort of ether. And then do the next 100 miles in a horrible, slaughtering sort of spastic stupor. The only way to keep alert on ether is to do up a lot of animals, not all at once, but steadily, just enough to maintain the focus of 90 miles an hour through Barstow. At 90 miles an hour through Barstow. Man, this is the way to travel, said my attorney. He leaned over to turn the volume up on the radio, humming along with the rhythm section and kind of moaning the words. 1 toke over the line, sweet Jesus. 1 toke over the line. 1 toke? You poor fool. Wait till you see those goddamn bats. I could barely hear the radio, slumped over on the far side of the seat, grappling with a tape recorder turned all the way up on Sympathy for the Devil. That was the only tape we had, so we played it constantly, over and over, as a kind of demented counterpart to the radio, and also to maintain our rhythm on the road. Constant speed is good for gas mileage, and for some reason that seemed important at the time. Indeed, on a trip like this one must be careful about gas consumption. Avoid those quick bursts of acceleration that drag blood to the back of the brain. My attorney saw the hitchhiker long before I did. "Let's give this boy a lift," he said, and before I could mount any argument, he was stopped, and this poor Okie kid was running up to the car with a big grin on his face, saying, "Hot damn, I never rode in a convertible before." "Is that right?" I said. "Well, I guess you're about ready, eh?" The kid nodded eagerly as we roared off. "We're your friends," said my attorney. "We're not like the others." Oh Christ, I thought. He's gone around the bend. "No more of that talk," I said sharply, "or I'll put the leeches on you." He grinned, seeming to understand. Luckily, the noise in the car was so awful between the wind and the radio and the tape machine that the kid in the back seat couldn't hear a word we were saying. Or could he? How long can we maintain, I wondered. How long before one of us starts raving and jabbering at this boy? What will he think then? This same lonely desert was the last known home of the Manson family. Will he make that grim connection when my attorney starts screaming about bats and huge manta rays coming down on the car? If so, well, we'll just have to cut off his head and bury him somewhere. I guess it goes without saying that we can't turn him loose. He'll report us at once to some kind of outback Nazi law enforcement agency, and they'll run us down like dogs. Jesus, did I say that? Or just think it? Was I talking? Did they hear me? I glanced over at my attorney, and he seemed oblivious, watching the road, driving our great red shark along at 110 or so. There was no sound from the back seat. Maybe I'd better have a chat with this boy, I thought. Perhaps if I explain things, he'll rest easy. Of course. I leaned around the seat and gave him a fine, big smile, admiring the shape of his skull. By the way, I said, there's one thing you should probably understand. He stared at me, not blinking. Was he gritting his teeth? Can you hear me? I yelled. He nodded. That's good, I said, because I want you to know that we're on our way to Las Vegas to find the American dream. I smiled. That's why we rented this car. It was the only way to do it. Can you grasp that? He nodded, but his eyes were nervous. I want you to have all the background, I said, because this is a very ominous assignment, with overtones of extreme personal danger. Hell, I forgot all about this beer. You want one? He shook his head. How about some ether? I said. What? Never mind. Let's get right to the heart of this thing. You see, about 24 hours ago, we were sitting in the Polo Lounge of the Beverly Hills Hotel, in the patio section, of course. And we were just sitting there under a palm tree when this uniformed dwarf came up to me with a pink telephone and said, "This must be the call you've been waiting for all this time, sir." I laughed and ripped open a beer can that foamed all over the back seat while I kept talking. And you know, he was right. I had been expecting that call, but I didn't know who it would come from. Do you follow me? The boy's face was a mask of pure fear and bewilderment. I blundered on. I want you to understand that this man at the wheel is my attorney. He's not just some dingbat I found on the strip. Shit, look at him. He doesn't look like you or me, right? It's because he's a foreigner. I think he's probably Samoan. But it doesn't matter, does it? Are you prejudiced? Oh, hell no, he blurted. I didn't think so, I said. Because in spite of his race, this man is extremely valuable to me. I glanced over at my attorney, but his mind was somewhere else. I whacked the back of the driver's seat with my fist. This is important, goddammit! This is a true story! The car swerved sickeningly, then straightened out. Keep your hands off my fucking neck! My attorney screamed. The kid in the back looked like he was ready to jump right out of the car and take his chances. Our vibrations were getting nasty, but why? I was puzzled, frustrated. Was there no communication in this car? Had we deteriorated to the level of dumb beasts? Because my story was true. I was certain of that. And it was extremely important, I felt, for the meaning of our journey to be made absolutely clear. We had certainly been sitting there in the Polo Lounge for many hours, drinking Singapore slings with mezcal on the side and beer chasers. And when the call came, I was ready. The dwarf approached our table cautiously, as I recall. When he handed me the pink telephone, I said nothing, merely listened. And then I hung up, turning to face my attorney. That was headquarters, I said. They want me to go to Las Vegas at once and make contact with a Portuguese photographer named Lacerda. They'll have the details. All I have to do is check into my suite, and he'll seek me out. My attorney said nothing for a moment. Then he suddenly came alive in his chair. God hell, he exclaimed. I think I see the pattern. This one sounds like real trouble. He tucked his khaki undershirt into his white rayon bell-bottoms and called for more drink. You're going to need plenty of legal advice before this thing is over, he said. And my first advice is that you should rent a very fast car with no top and get the hell out of LA for at least 48 hours. He shook his head sadly. This blows my weekend, because naturally I'll have to go with you, and we'll have to arm ourselves. Why not? I said. If a thing like this is worth doing at all, it is worth doing well. We'll need some decent equipment and plenty of cash on the line, if only for drugs and a super sensitive tape recorder, for the sake of a permanent record. What kind of story is this? He asked. I'm in 400, I said. It's the richest off-the-road race for motorcycles and dune buggies in the history of organized sport. a fantastic spectacle in honor of some fatback bracero named Del Webb, who owns the luxurious Mint Hotel in the heart of downtown Las Vegas. At least that's what the press release says. My man in New York just read it to me. Well, he said, as your attorney, I advise you to buy a motorcycle. How else can you cover a thing like this righteously? No way, I said. Where can we get a hold of a Vincent Black Shadow? What's that? A fantastic bike, I said. The new model is something like 2,000 cubic inches, developing 200 brake horsepower at 4,000 revolutions per minute on a magnesium frame with 2 styrofoam seats and a total curb weight of exactly 200 pounds. That sounds about right for this gig, he said. It is, I assured him. The fucker's not much for turning, but it's pure hell on the straightaway. It'll outrun the F-111 on takeoff. Takeoff, he said. Can we handle that much torque? Absolutely, I said. I'll call New York for some cash. I don't know if the music's coming through. Chapter 2. Check, check. The seizure of $300 from a pig woman in Beverly Hills. The New York office was not familiar with the Vincent Black Shadow. They referred me to the Los Angeles Bureau, which is actually in Beverly Hills, just a few long blocks from the Polo Lounge. But when I got there, the money woman refused to give me more than $300 in cash. She had no idea who I was, she said. And by that time I was pouring sweat. My blood is too thick for California. I have never been able to properly explain myself in this climate, not with the soaking sweats, wild red eyeballs, and trembling hands. So I took the $300 and left. My attorney was waiting in a bar around the corner. This won't make the nut, he said, unless we have unlimited credit. I assured him we would. You Samoans are all the same, I told him. You have no faith in the essential decency of the white man's culture. Jesus, just 1 hour ago we were sitting over there in that stinking Bajanillo, stone broke and paralyzed for the weekend, when a call comes through from some total stranger in New York telling me to go to Las Vegas, and expenses be damned. And then he sends me over to some office in Beverly Hills where another total stranger gives me $300 raw cash for no reason at all. I tell you, my man, this is the American dream in action. We'd be fools not to ride this strange torpedo all the way out to the end. Indeed, he said. We must do it. Right, I said. But first we need the car, and after that the cocaine, and then the tape recorder for special music, and some Acapulco shirts. The only way to prepare for a trip like this, I felt, was to dress up like human peacocks, and get crazy, then screech off across the desert and cover the story. Never lose sight of the primary responsibility. But what was the story? Nobody had bothered to say. So we would have to drum it up on our own. Free enterprise. The American dream. Horatio Alger gone mad on drugs in Las Vegas. Do it now. Pure gonzo journalism. There's also the socio-psychic factor. Every now and then, when your life gets complicated and the weasels start closing in, the only real cure is to load up on heinous chemicals and then drive like a bastard from Hollywood to Las Vegas. To relax, as it were, in the womb of the desert sun. Just roll the roof back and screw it on. Grease the face with white tanning butter and move out with the music at top volume and at least a pint of ether. Getting hold of the drugs had been no problem, but the car and the tape recorder were not easy things to round up at 6:30 on a Friday afternoon in Hollywood. I already had one car, but it was far too small and slow for desert work. Far too small and slow for desert work. We went to a Polynesian bar. where my attorney made 17 calls before locating a convertible with adequate horsepower and proper color. Hang on to it, I heard him say into the phone. We'll be over to make the trade in 30 minutes. And after a pause, he began shouting. What? Of course the gentleman has a major credit card. Do you realize who the fuck you're talking to? Don't take any guff from those swine. From these swine, I said, as he slammed the phone down. Now we need a sound store with the finest equipment. Nothing dinky. We want one of those new Belgian Helio Watts with a voice-activated shotgun mic for picking up conversations in oncoming cars. We made several more calls and finally located our equipment in a store about 5 miles away. It was closed, but the salesman said he would wait if we hurried. But we were delayed en route when a stingray in front of us killed a pedestrian on Sunset Boulevard. The store was closed by the time we got there. There were people inside, but they refused to come to the double glass door until we gave it a few belts, and made ourselves clear. Finally, 2 salesmen brandishing tire irons came to the door, and we managed to negotiate the sale through a tiny slit. Then they opened the door just wide enough to shove the equipment out before slamming and locking it again. Now take that stuff and get the hell away from here, one of them shouted through the slit. My attorney shook his fist at them. We'll be back, he yelled. One of these days I'll toss a fucking bomb into this place. I have your name on this sales slip. I found out where you live and burn your house down. That'll give them something to think about, he muttered as we drove off. That guy is a paranoid psychotic anyway. Very easy to spot. We had trouble again at the car rental agency after signing all the papers. I got in the car and almost lost control of it while backing across the lot to the gas pump. The rental man was obviously shaken. Say there, you fellas are going to be careful with this car, aren't you? Of course. Well, good God, he said. You just backed over that 2-foot concrete abutment and you didn't even slow down. 45 in reverse. And you barely missed the bump. No harm done, I said. I always test the transmission that way. The rear end for stress factors. Meanwhile, my attorney was busy transferring rum and ice from the Pinto to the back seat of the convertible. The rental man watched him nervously. Say, he said, are you fellows drinking? Not me, I said. Just fill the goddamn tank, my attorney snapped. We're in a hell of a hurry. We're on our way to Las Vegas for a desert race. What? Never mind, I said. We're responsible people. I watched him put the gas cap on. Then I jammed the thing into low gear and we lurched into traffic. There's another warrior, said my attorney. He's probably all cranked up on speed. Yeah, you should have given him some reds. Reds wouldn't help a pig like that, he said. To hell with him. I have a lot of business to take care of before we can get on the road. I'd like to get a hold of some priest's robes, I said. They might come in handy in Las Vegas. There were no costume stores open, and we weren't up to burglarizing a church. Why bother, said my attorney. And you have to remember that a lot of cops are good, vicious Catholics. Can you imagine what those bastards would do to us if we got busted all drugged up and drunk and stolen investments? Jesus, they'd castrate us. You're right, I said. And for Christ's sake, don't smoke that pipe at stoplights. Keep in mind that we're exposed. He nodded. We need a big hookah. Keep it down here on the seat, out of sight. If anybody sees us, they'll think we're using oxygen. Spent the rest of the night rounding up materials and packing the car. Then we ate the mescaline and went swimming in the ocean. Somewhere around dawn, we had breakfast in a Malibu coffee shop. Then drove very carefully across town and plunged onto the smog-shrouded Pasadena freeway heading east. Chapter 3, Strange Medicine on the Desert. Crisis of Confidence. I'm still vaguely haunted by our hitchhiker's remark about how he'd never rode in a convertible before. Here's this poor geek living in a world of convertibles, zipping past them on the highways all the time, and he's never even ridden in one. It made me feel like King Farouk. I was tempted to have my attorney pull into the next airport and arrange some kind of simple common law contract whereby he could just give the car to this unfortunate bastard. Just say, here, sign this and the car is yours. Give him the keys and then use the credit card to zap off on a jet to some place like Miami and rent another huge fire apple red convertible for a drag-out top-speed run across the water all the way to the last stop in Key West. And then trade the car for a boat to keep moving. But this maniac notion passed quickly. There was no point in getting this harmless kid locked up. And besides, I had plans for this car. I was looking forward to flashing around Las Vegas in the bugger. Maybe do a bit of serious drag racing on the strip. Pull up to that big stoplight in front of the Flamingo and start screaming at the traffic. All right, you chicken shit wimps, you pansies. When this goddamn light flips green, I'm gonna stomp down on this thing and blow every one of you gutless punks off the road. Right. Challenge the bastards on their own turf. Come screeching up to the crosswalk, bucking and skidding with a bottle of rum in one hand, and jamming the horn to drown out the music.
Gene cover. Cool background.
Damn it, I forgot this TTS is on. Thank you. Settings. Applications. Push the speech. Okay. Should do it. God, it's hot. Glazed eyes insanely dilated behind tiny black, gold-rimmed greaser shades, screaming gibberish. A genuinely dangerous drunk, reeking of ether and terminal psychosis. Revving the engine up to a terrible high-pitched, chattering whine, waiting for the light to change. How often does a chance like that come around? To jangle the bastards right down to the core of their spleens. Old elephants limp off to the hills to die. Old Americans go out to the highway and drive themselves to death with huge cars. But our trip was different. It was a classic affirmation of everything right and true and decent in the national character. It was a gross physical salute to the fantastic possibilities of life in this country, but only for those with true grit. And we were chock full of that. My attorney understood the concept, despite his racial handicap. But our hitchhiker was not an easy person to reach. He said he understood, but I could see in his eyes that he didn't. He was lying to me. The car suddenly veered off the road and we came to a sliding halt in the gravel. I was hurled against the dashboard. My attorney was slumped over the wheel. What's wrong? I yelled. We can't stop here. This is bat country. My heart, he groaned. Where's the medicine? Oh, I said, the medicine, yes, it's right here. I reached into the kit bag for the amyls. The kid seemed petrified. Don't worry, I said. This man has a bad heart. Angina pectoris. We have the cure for it. Yes, here they are. I picked 4 amyls out of the tin box and handed 2 of them to my attorney. He immediately cracked one under his nose, and I did likewise. I took a long snort and fell back on the seat, staring straight up at the sun. Turn up that fucking music, he screamed. My heart feels like an alligator. Volume, clarity, bass. We must have bass. He flailed his naked arms at the sky. What's wrong with us? Are we goddamn old ladies? I turned both the radio and the tape machine up full bore. You scurvy, shisty bastard, I said. Watch your language. You're talking to a doctor of journalism. He was laughing out of control. What the fuck are we doing out here on this desert? He shouted. Somebody call the police. We need help. Pay no attention to this swine, I said to the hitchhiker. He can't handle the medicine. Actually, we're both doctors of journalism, and we're on our way to Las Vegas to cover the main story of our generation. And then I began laughing. My attorney hunched around to face the hitchhiker. The truth is, he said, we're going to Las Vegas to croak a skag baron named Savage Henry. I've known him for years, but he ripped us off. And you know what that means, right? I wanted to shut him off, but we were both helpless with laughter. What the fuck were we doing out here on this desert? And we both had bad hearts. Savage Henry has cashed his check, my attorney snarled at the kid in the back seat. We're going to rip his lungs out. And eat them, I blurted. That bastard won't get away with this. What's going on in this country when a scum-sucker like that can get away with sandbagging a doctor of journalism? Nobody answered. My attorney was cracking another animal, and the kid was climbing out of the back seat, scrambling down the trunk lid. Thanks for the ride, he yelled. Thanks a lot, I like you guys, don't worry about me. His feet hit the asphalt, and he started running back towards Baker, out in the middle of the desert. Not a tree in sight. Wait a minute, I yelled. Come back and get a beer. Apparently, he couldn't hear me. The music was very loud, and he was moving away from us at a good speed. Good riddance, said my attorney. We had a real freak on our hands. That boy made me nervous. Did you see his eyes? He was still laughing. Jesus, he said. This is good medicine. I opened the door and reeled around to the driver's side. Move over, I said. I'll drive. We have to get out of California before that kid finds a cop. Shit, that'll be hours, said my attorney. He's 100 miles from anywhere. So are we, I said. Let's turn around and drive back to the Polo Lounge, he said. We'll never look for us there. I ignored him. Open the tequila, I yelled as the wind scream took over again. I stomped on the accelerator as we hurtled back onto the highway. Moments later, he leaned over with a map. There's a place up ahead called Mescal Springs, he said. As your attorney, I advise you to stop there and take a swim. I shook my head. It's absolutely imperative that we get to the Mint Hotel before the deadline for press registration, I said. Otherwise, we might have to pay for our suite. He nodded. But let's forget that bullshit about the American dream, he said. The important thing is the great Samoan dream. He was rummaging around in the kit bag. I think it's about time to chew up a blotter, he said. That cheap mescaline wore off a long time ago, and I don't know if I can stand the smell of that goddamn ether any longer. I like it, I said. We should soak a towel with the stuff and put it down on the floorboard by the accelerator, so the fumes will rise up in my face all the way to Las Vegas. He was turning the tape cassette over. The radio was screaming, "Power to the people, ride on." John Lennon's political song, 10 years too late. That poor fool should have stayed where he was, said my attorney. Punks like that just get in the way when they try to be serious. Speaking of serious, I said, I think it's about time to get into the ether and the cocaine. Forget ether, he said. Let's save it for soaking down the rug in the suite. But here's this. Or half of the sunshine blotter. Just chew it up like baseball gum. I took the blotter and ate it. My attorney was now fumbling with the salt shaker containing the cocaine, opening it, spilling it, then screaming and grabbing at the air as our fine white dust blew up and out across the desert highway. A very expensive little twister rising up from the great red shark. Oh, Jesus, he moaned. Did you see what God just did to us? God didn't do that, I shouted. You did it. You're a fucking narcotics agent. I was onto your stinking act from the start, you pig. You better be careful, he said, and suddenly he was waving a fat black .357 Magnum at me. One of those snub-nosed Colt pythons with the beveled cylinder. Plenty of vultures out here, he said. They'll pick your bones clean before morning. You whore, I said. When we get to Las Vegas, I'll have you chopped in a hamburger. What do you think the drug bund will do when I show up with a Samoan narcotics agent? He'll kill us both, he said. Savage Henry knows who I am. Shit, I'm your attorney. He burst into wild laughter. You're full of acid, you fool. It'll be a goddamn miracle if we can get to the hotel and check in before you turn into a wild animal. Are you ready for that? Checking into a Vegas hotel under a phony name with intent to commit capital fraud? And a head full of acid? He was laughing again. Then he jammed his nose down toward the salt shaker, aiming the thin green roll of the $20 bill straight into what was left of the powder. How long do we have? I said. Maybe 30 more minutes, he replied. As your attorney, I advise you to drive at top speed. Las Vegas was just up ahead. I could see the Strip Hotel skyline looming up through the blue desert ground haze. The Sahara, the landmark, the Americana, and the ominous Thunderbird. A cluster of gray rectangles in the distance, rising out of the cactus. 30 minutes was going to be very close. The objective was the big tower of the Mint Hotel downtown, and if we didn't get there before we lost all control, there was also the Nevada State Prison, upstate in Carson City. I had been there once, only for a talk with the prisoners, and I didn't want to go back for any reason at all. So there was really no choice. We'd have to run the gauntlet, and acid be damned. Go through all the official gibberish, get the car into the hotel garage, work out on the desk clerk, deal with the bellboy, sign in for the press passes. All of it bogus, totally illegal, a fraud on its face. But of course it would have to be done. Kill the body and the head will die. This line appears in my notebook for some reason. Perhaps some connection with Joe Frazier. Is he still alive? Still able to talk? I watched that fight in Seattle, horribly twisted, about 4 seats down the aisle from the governor. A very painful experience in every way. The proper end to the 60s. Tim Leary, a prisoner of Eldridge Cleaver in Algeria. Bob Dylan clipping coupons in Greenwich Village. Both Kennedys murdered by mutants. Owsley folding napkins on Terminal Island. And finally, Cassius Ali, belted incredibly off his pedestal by a human hamburger. A man on the verge of death. Joe Frazier, like Nixon, had finally prevailed for reasons that people like me refused to understand, at least not out loud. But that was some other era, burned out and long gone from the brutish realities of this foul year of our Lord, 1971. A lot of things had changed in those years, and now I was in Vegas as the motorsports editor of this fine, slick magazine that had sent me out here in the Great Red Shark for some reason that nobody claimed to understand. Just check it out, they said, and we'll take it from there. Indeed, check it out. And when we finally arrived at the Mint Hotel, my attorney was unable to cope artfully with the registration procedure. We were forced to stand in line with all the others, which proved to be extremely difficult under the circumstances. I kept telling myself, be quiet, be calm, say nothing, speak only when spoken to. Name, rank, and press affiliation, nothing else. Ignore this terrible drug. Pretend it's not happening. There was no way to explain the terror I felt when I finally lunged up to the clerk and began babbling. All my well-rehearsed lines fell apart under that woman's stony glare. Hi there, I said. My name is... Raoul Duke. Yes, on the list, that's for sure. Free lunch. Final wisdom, total coverage. Why not? I have my attorney with me, and I realize, of course, that his name is not on the list. We must have that suite. Yes, this man is actually my driver. We brought this red shark all the way from the Strip, and now it's time for the desert, right? Yes. Just check the list and you'll see. Don't worry. What's the score here? What's next? The woman never blinked. Your room's not ready yet, she said, but there's somebody looking for you. No! I shouted. Why? We haven't done anything yet. My legs felt rubbery. I gripped the desk and sagged toward her as she held out the envelope, but I refused to accept it. The woman's face was changing, swelling, pulsing. Horrible green jowls and fangs, jutting out, the face of a moray eel, deadly poison. I lunged backward into my attorney, who gripped my arms as he reached out to take the note. "I'll handle this," he said, to the moray woman. "This man has a bad heart, but I have plenty of medicine. My name is Dr. Gonzo. Prepare our suite at once. We'll be in the bar." The woman shrugged as he led me away. In a town full of bedrock crazies, nobody even notices an acid freak. We struggled through the crowded lobby and found 2 stools at the bar. My attorney ordered 2 Cuba Libres with beer and mezcal on the side. Then he opened the envelope. "Who's Lacerda?" he asked. "He's waiting for us in a room on the 12th floor." I couldn't remember. Lacerda. The name rang a bell, but I couldn't concentrate. Terrible things were happening all around us. Right next to me, a huge reptile was gnawing on a woman's neck. The carpet was a blood-soaked sponge. Impossible to walk on it. No footing at all. "Order some golf shoes," I whispered. "Otherwise we'll never get out of this place alive. You notice these lizards don't have any trouble moving around in this muck? It's because they have claws on their feet." "Lizards," he said. "If you think we're in trouble now, wait till you see what's happening in the elevators." He took off his Brazilian sunglasses and I could see he'd been crying. "I just went upstairs to see this man Lacerda," he said. I told him we knew what he was up to. "He says he's a photographer. When I mentioned Savage Henry, well, that did it. He freaked. I could see it in his eyes. Knows we're onto him." "Does he understand we have magnums?" I said. "No. But I told him we had a Vincent Black shadow. That scared the piss out of him." "Good," I said. "What about our room? And the golf shoes? We're right in the middle of a fucking reptile zoo. And somebody's giving booze to these goddamn things. It won't be long before they tear us to shreds. Jesus, look at the floor. You ever seen so much blood? How many have they killed already?" I pointed across the room to a group that seemed to be staring at us. "Holy shit, look at that bunch over there. They've spotted us." "That's the press table," he said. "That's where you have to sign in for our credentials." "Shit, let's get it over with. You handle that, and I'll get the room." Hideous music and the sound of many shotguns, rude vibes on a Saturday evening in Vegas. We finally got into the suite around dusk, and my attorney was immediately on the phone to room service, ordering 4 club sandwiches, 4 shrimp cocktails, a quart of rum, and 9 fresh grapefruits. "Vitamin C," he explained. "We'll need all we can get." I agreed. By this time, the drink was beginning to cut the acid, and my hallucinations were down to a tolerable level. The room service waiter had a vaguely reptilian cast to his features, but I was no longer seeing huge pterodactyls lumbering around the corridors in pools of fresh blood. The only problem now was a gigantic neon sign outside the window, blocking our view of the mountains. Millions of colored balls running around a very complicated track, strange symbols, and filigree giving off a loud hum. "Look outside," I said. "Why?" There's a big machine in the sky, some kind of electric snake, coming straight at us. "Shoot it," said my attorney. "Not yet," I said. "I want to study its habits." He went over to the corner and began pulling on a chain to close the drapes. "Look," he said, "you gotta stop this talk about snakes and leeches and lizards and that stuff. It's making me sick." "Don't worry," I said. "Worry? Jesus, I almost went crazy down there in the bar." will never let us back in that place, not after your scene at the press table. What scene? You bastard, he said. I left you alone for 3 minutes. You scared the shit out of those people, waving that goddamn marlin spike around and yelling about reptiles. You're lucky I came back in time. They were ready to call the cops. I said you were only drunk and that I was taking you up to your room for a cold shower. Hell, the only reason they gave us the press passes was to get you out of there. He was pacing around nervously. Jesus, that scene straightened me out. I must have some drugs. What have you done with the mescaline? The kit bag, I said. He opened the bag and ate 2 pellets while I got the tape machine going. Maybe you should eat one of these, he said. That acid's still working on you. I agreed. We have to go to the track before dark, I said. We have time to watch the TV news. Let's carve up this grapefruit and make a pine rum punch. Maybe toss in a blotter. Where's the car? We gave it to somebody in the parking lot, he said. I have the ticket in my briefcase. What's the number? I'll call down and have them wash the bastard. Get rid of that dust and grime. Good idea, he said. But he couldn't find the ticket. Well, we're fucked, I said. We'll never convince them to give us that car without proof. He thought for a moment, then picked up the phone and asked for the garage. This is Dr. Gonzo in 850, he said. I seem to have lost my parking stub for the red convertible I left with you. But I want the car washed and ready to go in 30 minutes. Can you send up a duplicate stub? What? Oh. Well, that's fine. He hung up and reached for the hash pipe. No problem, he said. That man remembers my face. That's good, I said. Probably have a big net ready for us when we show up. He shook his head. As your attorney, I advise you not to worry about me. The TV news was about the Laos invasion, a series of horrifying disasters. Explosions and twisted wreckage, men fleeing in terror. Pentagon generals battling insane lies. Turn that shit off, screamed my attorney. Let's get out of here. A wise move. Moments after we picked up the car, my attorney went into a drug coma and ran a red light on Main Street before I could bring us under control. I propped him up in the passenger seat and took the wheel myself, feeling fine, extremely sharp. All around me in traffic, I could see people talking and wanting to hear what they were saying. All of them. But the shotgun mic was in the trunk, and I decided to leave it there. Las Vegas is not the kind of town where you want to drive down Main Street aiming a black bazooka-looking instrument at people. Turn up the radio. Turn up the tape machine. Look into the sunset up ahead. Roll the windows down for a better taste of the cool desert wind. Ah, yes. This is what it's all about. Total control now. Tooling along the main drag on a Saturday night in Las Vegas. 2 good old boys in a fire apple red convertible. Stoned, ripped, twisted. Good people. Great God, what is this terrible music? The battle hymn of Lieutenant Calley. As we go marching on, when I reach my final campground in that land beyond the sun, and the great commander asks me, what did he ask you, Rusty? Did you fight or did you run? And what did you tell him, Rusty? We responded to their rifle fire with everything we had. No, I can't be hearing this. It must be the drug. I glanced over at my attorney, but he was staring up at the sky, and I could see that his brain had gone off to that campground beyond the sun. Thank Christ he can't hear this music, I thought. It would drive him into a racist frenzy. Mercifully, the song ended, but my mood was already shattered, and now the fiendish cactus juice took over, plunging me into a subhuman funk as we suddenly came up on the turn-off to the Mint Gun Club. 1 mile, the sign said. But even a mile away, I could hear the crackling scream of 2-stroke bike engines winding out. And then coming closer, I heard another sound. Shotguns, no mistaking that flat, hollow boom. I stopped the car. What the hell is going on down there? I rolled up the windows and eased down the gravel road, hunched low on the wheel, until I saw about a dozen figures pointing shotguns into the air, firing at regular intervals. Standing on a slab of concrete out there in the Mesquite Desert. This scraggly little oasis in a wasteland north of Vegas. They were clustered with their shotguns, about 50 yards away from a one-story concrete block house, half shaded by 10 or 12 trees, and surrounded by cop cars, bike trailers, and motorcycles. Of course, the Mint Gun Club. These lunatics weren't letting anything interfere with their target practice. Here were about 100 bikers, mechanics, and assorted motorsport types milling around in the pit area, signing in for tomorrow's race, idly sipping beers and appraising each other's machinery. And right in the middle of all this, oblivious to everything but the clay pigeons flipping out of the traps every 5 seconds or so, the shotgun people never missed a beat. But why not, I thought. The shooting provided a certain rhythm, sort of steady bass line, to the high-pitched chaos of the bike scene. I parked the car and wandered into the crowd, leaving my attorney in his coma. I bought a beer and watched the bikes checking in. Many 405 Husqvarnas, high-tuned Swedish fireballs, also many Yamahas, Kawasaki's, a few 500 Triumphs, Maicos, here and there, a CZ, per Sang. All very fast, super light dirt bikes. No hogs in this league, not even a Sportster. That would be like entering a great red shark into the dune buggy competition. Maybe I should do that, I thought. Sign my attorney up as the driver, then send him out to the starting line with a head full of ether and acid. How would they handle it? Nobody would dare go out on the track with a person that crazy. He would roll on the first turn and take out 4 or 5 dune buggies. A kamikaze trip. What's the entry fee? I asked the desk man. $250, he said. What if I told you I had a Vincent Black Shadow? He stared up at me, saying nothing, not friendly. I noticed he was wearing a .38 revolver on his belt. Forget it, I said. My driver's sick anyway. His eyes narrowed. Your driver ain't the only one sick around here, buddy. There's a bone in his throat, I said. What? The man was getting ugly, but suddenly his eyes switched away. He was staring at something else. My attorney, no longer wearing his Danish sunglasses, no longer wearing his Acapulco shirt. A very crazy-looking person, half naked, and breathing heavily. What's the trouble here? He croaked. This man is my client. Are you prepared to go to court? I grabbed his shoulder and gently spun him around. Never mind, I said. It's the Black Shadow. They won't accept it. Wait a minute, he shouted. What do you mean they won't accept it? Have you made a deal with these pigs? Certainly not, I said, pushing him along toward the gate. But you notice they're all armed. We're the only people here without guns. Can't you hear that shooting over there? He paused, listened for an instant, then suddenly began running toward the car. You cocksuckers, he screamed over his shoulder. We'll be back. By the time he got the shark back on the highway, he was able to talk. Jesus Christ, how did we get mixed up with that gang of psychotic bigots? Let's get the fuck out of this town. Those scumbags were trying to kill us. Five. Covering the story, a glimpse of the press in action, ugliness and failure. The racers were ready at dawn. Fine sunrise over the desert, very tense. But the race didn't start until 9, so we had to kill about 3 long hours in the casino next to the pits. And that's where the trouble started. The bar opened at 7. There was also a coffee and donut canteen in the bunker. For those of us who had been up all night in places like the Circus were in no mood for coffee and donuts. We wanted strong drink. Our tempers were ugly, and there were at least 200 of us, so they opened the bar early. By 8:30, there were big crowds around the crap tables. The place was full of noise and drunken shouting. A bony, middle-aged hoodlum wearing a Harley-Davidson t-shirt boomed up to the bar and yelled, "God damn, what day is this? Saturday?" "More like Sunday," somebody replied. "Ha, that's a bitch, ain't it?" The HD boomer shouted to nobody in particular. "Last night I was out home in Long Beach, and somebody said they were running the Mint 400 today, so I says to my old lady, 'Man, I'm going,'" he laughed. "So she gives me a lot of crap about it, you know? So I started slapping her around, and the next thing I knew, two guys I'd never seen before got me out on the sidewalk, working me over. Jesus, they beat me stupid." He laughed again, talking into the crowd and not seeming to care who listened. "Hell yes," he continued. Then one of them says, "Where are you going?" And I says, "Las Vegas, the Mint 400. So they gave me $10 and drove me down to the bus station. He paused. At least I think it was them. "Well, anyway, here I am, and I tell you, that was one hell of a long night, man. 7 hours on that goddamn bus. But when I woke up, it was dawn, and here I was in downtown Vegas, and for a moment, I didn't know what the hell I was doing here. All I could think was, oh Jesus, here we go again. Who's divorced me this time?" He accepted a cigarette from somebody in the crowd, still grinning as he lit it up. But then I remembered, by God, I was here for the Mint 400. And, man, that's all I needed to know. I tell you, it's wonderful to be here, man. I don't give a damn who wins or loses. It's just wonderful to be here with you people. Nobody argued with him. We all understood. In some circles, the Mint 400 is a far, far better thing than the Super Bowl, the Kentucky Derby, and the Lower Oakland Roller Derby finals all rolled into one. This race attracts a very special breed, and our man in the Harley t-shirt was clearly one of them. The correspondent for Life nodded sympathetically and screamed at the bartender, "Sends a man was he needs." "Fast up with it," I croaked. "Why not 5? I smacked the bar with my open, bleeding palm. "Hell yes, bring us 10. "I'll back it," the Life man screamed. He was losing his grip on the bar, sinking slowly to his knees, but still speaking with definite authority. "This is a magic moment in sport. It may never come again." Then his voice seemed to break. "I once did the Triple Crown," he muttered, "but it was nothing like this." The frog-eyed woman clawed feverishly at his belt. "Stand up," she pleaded. "Please stand up. You'd be a very handsome man if you'd just stand up." He laughed distractedly. "Listen, madam," he snapped. "I'm damn near intolerably handsome down here where I am. You'd go crazy if I stood up." The woman kept pulling at him. She'd been mooning at his elbows for 2 hours, and now she was making her move. The man from Life wanted no part of it. He slumped deeper into his crotch. I turned away. It was too horrible. We were, after all, the absolute cream of the national sporting press, and we were gathered here in Las Vegas for a very special assignment, to cover the 4th annual Mint 400. And when it comes to things like this, you don't fool around. But now, even before the spectacle got underway, there were signs that we might be losing control of the situation. Here we were on this fine Nevada morning, this cool, bright dawn on the desert, hunkered down in some greasy bar in a concrete blockhouse, a gambling casino called the Mint Gun Club, about 10 miles out of Vegas. And with the race about to start, we were dangerously disorganized. Outside, the lunatics were playing with their motorcycles, taping the headlights, topping off oil in the forks, last-minute bolt tightening, carburetor screws, manifold nuts, etc. And the first 10 bikes blasted off on the stroke of 9. It was extremely exciting, and we all went outside to watch. The flag went down, and these 10 poor buggers popped their clutches and zoomed into the first turn, all together. Then somebody grabbed the lead, a 405 Husqvarna, as I recall, and cheer went up as the rider screwed it on and disappeared in a cloud of dust. "Well, that's that," somebody said. "They'll be back around in an hour or so. Let's go back to the bar." But not yet. No. There were something like 190 more bikes waiting to start. They went off 10 at a time, every 2 minutes. At first it was possible to watch them out a distance of some 200 yards from the starting line. This visibility didn't last long. The third brace of 10 disappeared into the dust about 100 yards from where we stood. And by the time they'd sent off the first 100, with still another 100 to go, our visibility was down to something like 50 feet. We could see as far as the hay bales and that at the end of the pits. Beyond that point, the incredible dust cloud that would hang over this part of the desert for the next 2 days was already formed up in solid. None of us realized at the time that this was the last we would see of the fabulous Mid-400. By noon it was hard to see the pit area from the bar/casino 100 feet away in the blazing sun. The idea of trying to cover this race in any conventional press sense was absurd. It was like trying to keep track of a swimming meet in an Olympic-sized pool filled with talcum powder instead of water. The Ford Motor Company had come through, as promised, with a press bronco and a driver. But after a few savage runs across the desert looking for motorcycles and occasionally finding one, I abandoned this vehicle to the photographers and went back to the bar. It was time, I felt, for an agonizing reappraisal of the whole scene. The race was definitely underway. I had witnessed the start. I was sure of that much. But what now? Rent a helicopter? Get back in that stinking Bronco? Wander out on the goddamn desert and watch these fools race past the check marks, one every 13 minutes? By 10 they were spread out all over the course. It was no longer a race. Now it was an endurance contest. The only visible action was at the start/finish line, where every few minutes some geek would come speeding out of the dust cloud and stagger off his bike, while his pit crew would gas it up and then launch it back onto the track with a fresh driver. For another 50-mile lap, another brutal hour of kidney-killing madness out there in that terrible dust-blind limbo. Somewhere around 11, I made another tour in the press vehicle, but all we found were 2 doom buggies full of what looked like retired petty officers from San Diego. They cut us off in a dry wash and demanded, "Where is the damn thing?" "Beats me," I said. "We're just good patriotic Americans like yourself." Both of their buggies were covered with ominous symbols, screaming eagles carrying American flags in their claws, a slant-eyed snake being chopped to bits by a buzzsaw made of stars and stripes, and one of the vehicles had what looked like a machine gun mount on the passenger side. They were having a bang-up time, just crashing around the desert at top speed and hassling anybody they met. "What outfit you fellas with?" one of them shouted. The engines were all roaring. We could barely hear each other. "The sporting press," I yelled. We're friendlies, hired geeks." Dim smiles. "If you want a good chase," I shouted, "you get after that skunk from CBS News up ahead in the big black Jeep. He's the man responsible for the selling of the Pentagon." "Hot damn," 2 of them screamed at once. "A black Jeep, you say?" They roared off, and so did we, bouncing across the rocks and scrub oak cactus like iron tumbleweeds. The beer in my hand flew up and hit the top, then fell on my lap and soaked my crotch with warm foam. "You're fired," I said to the driver. "Take me back to the pits." It was time, I felt, to get grounded, to ponder this rotten assignment and figure out how to cope with it. Lacerda insisted on total coverage. He wanted to go back in the dust storm and keep trying for some rare combination of film and lens that might penetrate the awful stuff. Joe, our driver, was willing. His name was not really Joe, but that's what we'd been instructed to call him. I had talked to the FOMOCO boss the night before, and when he mentioned the driver he was assigning to us, he said, "His real name is Steve. You should call him Joe." "Why not?" I said. "We'll call him anything he wants. How about Zoom?" "No dice," said the Ford man. "It has to be Joe." Lacerda agreed, and sometime around noon, he went out on the desert, again, in the company of our driver, Joe. I went back to the blockhouse, bar/casino, that was actually the Midcoat Club, where I began to drink heavily, think heavily, and make many heavy notes. Six. A night on the town. Confrontation at the Desert Inn. Drug frenzy. Saturday, midnight. Memories of this night are extremely hazy. All I have for guide pegs is a pocket full of Keno cards and cocktail napkins, all covered with scribbled notes. Here's one. Get the Ford man. Demand a Bronco for race observation purposes. Photos. Lacerda. Call. Why not a helicopter? Get on the phone. Lean on the phoners. Heavy yelling. Another says, sign on Paradise Boulevard. Stopless and topless. Bush League sex compared to LA. Pasties here. Total naked public humping in LA. Las Vegas is a society of armed masturbators / gambling is the kicker here. Sex is extra. Weird trip for the high rollers. House whores for winners. Hand jobs for the bad luck crowd. A long time ago, when I lived in Big Sur, down the road from Lionel Olay, I had a friend who liked to go to Reno for the crap shooting. He owned a sporting goods store in Carmel, and one month he drove his Mercedes highway cruiser to Reno on 3 consecutive weekends, winning heavily each time. After 3 trips, he was something like $15,000 ahead, so he decided to skip the 4th weekend and take some friends to dinner at Nippenth. Always quick winners, he explained. Besides, it's a long drive. On Monday morning, he got a phone call from Reno, from the general manager of the casino he'd been working out on. "We missed you this weekend," said the GM. "The pitmen were bored." "Shucks," said my friend. So the next weekend, he flew up to Reno in a private plane with a friend and 2 girls, all special guests of the GM. Nothing too good for high rollers. And on Monday morning, the same plane, the casino's plane, flew him back to the Monterey airport. The pilot lent him a dime to call a friend for a ride to Carmel. He was $30,000 in debt. And 2 months later, he was looking down the barrel of one of the world's heaviest collection agencies. So he sold his store, but that didn't make the nut. They would wait for the rest, he said. Then he got stumped, which convinced him that maybe he'd be better off borrowing enough money to pay the whole wad. Mainline gambling is a very heavy business. In Las Vegas, makes Reno seem like your friendly neighborhood grocery store. For a loser, Vegas is the meanest town on earth. Until about a year ago, there was a giant billboard on the outskirts of Las Vegas saying, "Don't gamble with marijuana. In Nevada, possession, 20 years. Sale, life." So I was not entirely at ease drifting around the casinos on this Saturday night with a car full of marijuana and a head full of acid. We had several narrow escapes. At one point, I tried to drive the Great Red Shark into the laundry room of the Landmark Hotel, but the door was too narrow, and the people inside seemed dangerously excited. We drove over to the Desert Inn to catch the Debbie Reynolds, Harry James show. "I don't know about you," I told my attorney, But in my line of business, it's important to be hep. Mine too, he said. But as your attorney, I advise you to drive over to the Tropicana and pick up on Guy Lombardo. He's in the Blue Room with his Royal Canadians. Why? I asked. Why what? Why should I pay out my hard-earned dollars to watch a fucking corpse? Look, he said. Why are we out here? To entertain ourselves or to do the job? The job, of course, I replied. We were driving around in circles, weaving through the parking lot of a place I thought was the Dunes, but it turned out to be the Thunderbird, or maybe it was the Hacienda. My attorney was scanning the Vegas visitor, looking for hints of action. How about Nickel Nick's Slot Arcade, he said. Hot slots. That sounds heavy. 29-cent hot dogs. Suddenly people were screaming at us. We were in trouble. Two thugs wearing red, gold military overcoats were looming over the hood. What the hell are you doing? One screamed. You can't park here. Why not? I said. Seemed like a reasonable place to park. Plenty of space. I've been looking for a parking spot for what seemed like a very long time. Too long. I was about ready to abandon the car and call a taxi. But then, yes, we found this space. Which turned out to be the sidewalk in front of the main entrance to the Desert Inn. I had run over so many curbs by this time that I hadn't even noticed the last one. But now we found ourselves in a position that was hard to explain. Blocking the entrance. Thugs yelling at us. Bad confusion. My attorney was out of the car in a flash, waving a $5 bill. We want this car parked. I'm an old friend of Debbie's. I used to romp with her. For a moment I thought he had blown it. Then one of the doormen reached out for the bill, saying, Okay, I'll take care of it, sir. And he tore off a parking stub. Holy shit, I said, as he hurried through the lobby. They almost had us there. That was quick thinking. What do you expect, he said. I'm your attorney, and you owe me $5. I want it now. I shrugged and gave him a bill. This garish, deep Orlon carpeted lobby of the Desert Inn seemed an inappropriate place to be haggling about nickel-dime bribes for the parking lot attendant. This was Bob Hope's turf, Frank Sinatra's, Spyro Agnew's. The lobby fairly reeked of high-grade formica and plastic palm trees. It was clearly a high-class refuge for big spenders. We approached the grand ballroom full of confidence. They refused to let us in. We were too late, said a man in a wine-colored tuxedo. The house was already full. No seats left, at any price. Fuck seats, said my attorney. We're old friends of Debbie's. We drove all the way from L.A. for this show, and we're goddamn well going in. The tux man began jabbering about fire regulations, but my attorney refused to listen. Finally, after a lot of bad noise, he let us in for nothing, provided we would stand quietly in the back and not smoke. We promised. But the moment we got inside, we lost control. The tension had been too great. Debbie Reynolds was yucking across the stage in a silver afro wig to the tune of Sergeant Pepper from the Golden Trumpet of Harry James. Jesus creeping shit, said my attorney. We've wandered into a time capsule. Heavy hands grabbed our shoulders. I jammed the hash pipe back into my pocket just in time. We were dragged across the lobby and held against the front door by goons until our car was fetched up. Okay, get lost, said the wine tux man. We're giving you a break. If Debbie has friends like you guys, she's in worse trouble than I thought. We'll see about this, my attorney shouted as we drove away. You paranoid scum. I drove around to the Circus Casino and parked near the back door. This is the place, I said. They'll never fuck with us here. Where's the ether? Said my attorney. This mescaline isn't working. I gave him the key to the trunk while I lit up the hash pipe. He came back with the ether bottle, uncapped it, then poured some into a Kleenex and mashed it under his nose, breathing heavily. I soaked another Kleenex and fouled my own nose. The smell was overwhelming, even with the top down. Soon we were staggering up the stairs towards the entrance, laughing stupidly and dragging each other along like drunks. This is the main advantage of ether. It makes you behave like the village drunkard in some early Irish novel. Total loss of basic motor skills, blurred vision, no balance, numb tongue. Severance of all connection between the body and the brain. Which is interesting because the brain continues to function more or less normally. You can actually watch yourself behaving in this terrible way, but you can't control them. You approach the turnstiles leading into the circus, and you know that when you get there, you have to give the man $2 or he won't let you inside. But when you get there, everything goes wrong. You misjudge the distance to the turnstile, and slam against it. Bounce off and grab hold of an old woman to keep from falling. Some angry Rotarian shoves you, and you think, "What's happening here? What's going on?" And you hear yourself mumbling, "Dogs fucked the Pope. No fault of mine. Watch out. Why money? My name is Brinks. I was born." Born? Get cheap. Overside. Woman and children to armored car. Orders from Captain Zeep. Ah, devil ether. A total body drug. The mind recoils in horror, unable to communicate with the spinal column. The hands flap crazily, unable to get money out of the pocket. Garbled laughter and hissing from the mouth, always smiling. Ether is the perfect drug for Las Vegas. In this town they love a drunk, fresh meat. So they put us through the turnstiles, and turned us loose inside. The circus is what the whole hep world would be doing on Saturday night if the Nazis had won the war. This is the Sixth Reich. The ground floor is full of gambling tables, like all the other casinos. But the place is about 4 stories high, in the style of a circus tent, and all manner of strange county fair Polish carnival madness is going on up in this place. Right above the gambling tables, the 40 flying Carazito brothers are doing a high-wire trapeze act, along with 4 muzzled wolverines and the 6 Ninfet sisters from San Diego. So you're down on the main floor playing blackjack, and the stakes are getting high when suddenly you chance to look up, and there, right smack above your head, is a half-naked 14-year-old girl being chased through the air by a snarling wolverine, which is suddenly locked in a death battle with 2 silver-painted Polacks, who come swinging down from the opposite balconies and meet in midair on the wolverine's neck. Both Polacks seize the animal as they fall straight down toward the crap tables, but they bounce off the net. They separate and spring back up towards the roof in 3 different directions, and just as they're about to fall again, they are grabbed out of the air by 3 Korean kittens and trapezed off to one of the balconies. This madness goes on, but nobody seems to notice. The gambling action runs 24 hours a day on the main floor, and the circus never ends. Meanwhile, all the upstairs balconies, the customers are being hustled by every conceivable kind of bizarre shuck. All kinds of funhouse-type booths. Shoot the pasties off the nipples of a 10-foot bull dyke and win a cotton candy goat. Stand in front of the fantastic machine, of this fantastic machine, my friend, and for just 99 cents, your likeness will appear 200 feet tall on a screen above downtown Las Vegas. 99 cents more for a voice message. Say whatever you want, fella. They'll hear you. Don't worry about that. Remember, you'll be 200 feet tall. Jesus Christ. I can see myself lying in bed at the Mint Hotel, half asleep, staring idly out the window, when suddenly a vicious Nazi drunk appears 200 feet tall in the midnight sky, screaming gibberish at the world. Woodstock über alles. We will close the drapes tonight. A thing like that could send a drug person careening around the room, like a ping-pong ball. Hallucinations are bad enough. But after a while, you'll learn to cope with things like seeing your dead grandmother crawling up your leg with a knife in her teeth. Most acid fanciers can handle this sort of thing, but nobody can handle that other trip. The possibility that any freak with $1.98 can walk into the circus and suddenly appear in the sky over downtown Las Vegas, 12 times the size of God, howling anything that comes into his head. No, this is not a good town for psychedelic drugs. Reality itself is too twisted. Good mescaline comes on slow. The first hour is all waiting. When about halfway through the second hour, you start cursing the creep who burned you, because nothing is happening. And then, zang, fiendish intensity, strange glow and vibrations. A very heavy gig in a place like the Circus. I hate to say this, said my attorney, as we sat down at the merry-go-round bar on the second balcony. This place is getting to me. I think I'm getting the fear. Nonsense, I said. We came out here to find the American dream. And now that we're in the vortex, you want to quit. I grabbed his bicep and squeezed. You must realize, I said, that we found the main nerve. I know, he said. That's what gives me the fear. The ether was wearing off. The acid was long gone. But the mescaline was running strong. We were sitting at a small round gold formica table, moving in orbit around the bartender. Look over there, I said. 2 women fucking a polar bear. Please, he said, don't tell me these things. Not now. He signaled the waitress for 2 more wild turkeys. This is my last drink, he said. How much money can you lend me? Not much, I said. Why? I have to go, he said. Go? Yes, leave the country, tonight. Calm down, I said. You'll be straight in a few hours. No, he said. This is serious. George Metesky was serious, I said. And you see what they did to him. Don't fuck around, he shouted. 1 more hour in this town and I'll kill somebody. I could see he was on the edge. That fearful intensity that comes at the peak of a mescaline seizure. Okay, I said. I'll lend you some money. Let's go outside and see how much we have left. Can we make it? He said. Well, that depends on how many people we've fucked between here and the door. Do you want to leave quietly? I want to leave fast, he said. Okay, let's pay this bill and get up very slowly. We're both out of our heads. This is going to be a long walk. I shouted at the waitress for a bill. She came over looking bored, and my attorney stood up. Did they pay you to screw that bear? He asked her. What? He's just kidding, I said, stepping between them. Come on, Doc. Let's go downstairs and gamble. I got him as far as the edge of the bar, the rim of the merry-go-round, but he refused to get off until it stopped turning. It won't stop, I said. It's not ever going to stop. I stepped off and turned around to wait for him, but he wouldn't move. And before I could reach out and pull him, off. He was carried away. Don't move, I shouted. You'll come around. His eyes were staring blindingly ahead, squinting with fear and confusion. But he didn't move a muscle until he'd made the whole circle. I waited until he was almost in front of me, then I reached out to grab him, but he jumped back and went around the circle again. This made me very nervous. I felt on the verge of a freak out. The bartender seemed to be watching us. Carson City, I thought. 20 years. I stepped on the merry-go-round and hurried around the bar, approaching my attorney on his blind side, and when he came to the right spot, I pushed him off. He staggered into the aisle and uttered a hellish scream as he lost his balance and went down, thrashing into the crowd, rolling like a log, then up again in a flash, fists clenched, looking for somebody to hit. I approached him with my hands in the air, trying to smile. You fell, I said. Let's go. But this time people were watching us. But the fool wouldn't move, and I knew what would happen if I grabbed him. Okay, I said. You stay here and go to jail. I'm leaving. I started walking fast towards the stairs, ignoring him. This moved him. Did you see that? He said, as he caught up with me. Some son of a bitch kicked me in the back. Probably the bartender, I said. He wanted to stomp you for what you said to the waitress. Good God, let's get out of here. Where's the elevator? Don't go near that elevator, I said. It's just what they want us to do. Trap us in a steel box and take us down to the basement. I looked over my shoulder, but nobody was following. Don't run, I said. They'd like an excuse to shoot us. He nodded and seemed to understand. We walked fast along the big indoor midway, shooting galleries, tattoo parlors, money changers, and cotton candy booths. Then out, through a bank of glass doors, and across the grass downhill to a parking lot where the red shark waited. You drive, he said. I think there's something wrong with me. Seven. Paranoid terror and the awful specter of sodomy. A flashing of knives and green water. And green water. When we got to the Mint, I parked in the street in front of the casino, around a corner from the parking lot. No point risking a scene in the lobby, I thought. Neither one of us could pass for drunk. We were both hyper-tense, extremely menacing vibrations all around us. We hurried through the casino and up the rear escalator. We made it to the room without meeting anybody. The key wouldn't open the door. My attorney was struggling desperately with it. Those bastards have changed the lock on us, he groaned. They probably searched the room. Jesus, we're finished. Suddenly, the door swung open. We hesitated, then hurried inside. No sign of trouble. Bolt everything, from my attorney. Use all the chains. He was staring at the Mint Hotel room key in his hand. Where did this one come from, he said, holding up a key with number 1221 on it. That's Lacerda's room, I said. He smiled. Yeah, that's right. I thought we might need it. What for? Let's go up there and blast him out of bed with the fire hose, he said. No, I said. We should leave the poor bastard alone. I get the feeling he's avoiding us for some reason. Don't kid yourself, he said. That Portuguese son of a bitch is dangerous. He's watching us like a hawk. He squinted at me. Have you made a deal with him? I talked with him on the phone, I said. While you were out getting the car washed. He said he was turning in early, so he can get out there to the starting line at dawn. My attorney was not listening. He uttered an anguished cry and smacked the wall with both hands. That dirty bastard, he shouted. I knew it. He got a hold of my woman. I laughed. That little blonde groupie with the film crew? You think he sodomized her? That's right. Laugh about it, he yelled. You goddamn honkies are all the same. By this time he opened a new bottle of tequila and was quaffing it down. Then he grabbed a grapefruit and sliced it in half with a Gerber Mini Magnum, stainless steel hunting knife with a blade like a fresh honed straight razor. Where'd you get that knife? I asked him. Room service sent it up, he said. I wanted something to cut the limes. What limes? They didn't have any, he said. They don't grow out here in the desert. He sliced the grapefruit into quarters, then into eighths and sixteenths. Then he began slashing aimlessly at the residue. That dirty toad bastard, he groaned. I knew I should have taken him out when I had the chance. Now he has her. I remember the girl. We'd had a problem with her on the elevator a few hours earlier. My attorney had made a fool of himself. You must be a writer, she said. What class are you in? Class? He snapped. The fuck do you mean? What do you write? She asked with a quick smile. We're filming the race for a TV series. Maybe we can use you. Use me? Mother of God, I thought. Here it comes. The elevator was crowded with race people. It was taking a long time to get from floor to floor. By the time we stopped at 3, he was trembling badly. 5 more to go. I ride the big ones, he shouted suddenly. The really big fuckers. I laughed, trying to diffuse the scene. The Vincent Black Shadow, I said. We're with the factory team. This brought a murmur of rude dissent from the crowd. Bullshit. somebody muttered behind me muttered. Wait a minute, my attorney shouted, and then to the girl. Pardon me, lady, but I think there's some kind of ignorant chicken sucker in this car who needs his face cut open. He plunged his hand into the pocket of his black plastic jacket and turned to face the people crowded in the rear of the elevator. You cheap, honky faggots, he snarled. Which one of you wants to get cut? I was watching the overhead floor indicator. The door opened at 7, but nobody moved. Dead silence. The door closed, up to 8, then open again. Still no sound or movement in the crowded car, just as the door began to close. I stepped off and grabbed his arm, jerking him out just in time. The door slid shut and the elevator light dinged 9. Quick, into the room, I said. Those bastards will have the pigs on us. We ran around the corner into the room. My attorney was laughing wildly. Spooked, he shouted. Do you see that? They were spooked, like rats in a death cage. Then as we bolted the door behind us, he stopped laughing. God damn, he said. It's serious now. That girl understood. She fell in love with me. Now, many hours later, he was convinced that Lacerda, the so-called photographer, had somehow got his hands on the girl. Let's go up there and castrate that fucker, he said, waving his new knife around in quick circles in front of his teeth. Did you put him onto her? Look, I said, you better put that goddamn blade away and get your head straight. I have to put the car in the lot. I was backing slowly toward the door. One of the things you learn after years of dealing with drug people is that everything is serious. You can turn your back on a person, but never turn your back on a drug, especially when it's waving a razor-sharp hunting knife in your eyes. Take a shower, I said. I'll be back in 20 minutes. I left quickly, locking the door behind me and taking the key to Lacerda's room. The one my attorney had stolen earlier. That poor geek, I thought, as I hurried down the escalator. They sent him out here on this perfectly reasonable assignment, just a few photos of motorcycles and dune buggies racing around the desert. And now he was plunged without realizing it into the maw of some world beyond his kin. There was no way he could possibly understand what was happening. What were you doing out here? What was the meaning of this trip? Did I actually have a big red convertible out here on the street? Was I just roaming around these Mint Hotel escalators in a drug frenzy of some kind? Or had I really come out here to Las Vegas to work on a story? I reached in my pocket for the room key. 1850, it said. At least that much was real. So my immediate task was to deal with the car and get back to that room. And then hopefully get straight enough to cope with whatever might happen at dawn. Now off the escalator and into the casino, big crowds, still tight around the crap tables. Who are these people? These faces? Where do they come from? They look like caricatures of used car dealers from Dallas. They're real. And sweet Jesus, there are a hell of a lot of them still screaming around these desert city crap stables at 4:30 on a Sunday morning, still humping the American dream, that vision of the big winner somehow emerging from the last-minute pre-dawn chaos of a stale Vegas casino. Big strike in Silver City. Beat the dealer and go home rich. Why not? I stopped at the money wheel and dropped $1 on Thomas Jefferson. A $2 bill. The straight freak ticket. Thinking, as always, that some idle instinct bet might carry the whole thing off. But no. Just another $2 down the tube. You bastards. No. Calm down. Learn to enjoy losing. The important thing is to cover the story on its own terms. Leave the other stuff to life and look, at least for now. On the way down the escalator, I saw the life man twisted feverishly into the telegraph booth, chanting his wisdom into the ear of some horny robot in a cubicle on the other coast. Indeed, Las Vegas at dawn, The racers are still asleep. The dust is still on the desert. 50,000 in prize money slumbers darkly in the office safe at Del Webb's fabulous Mint Hotel in the bright heart of Casino Center. Extreme tension. And our life team is here, as always, with a sturdy police escort. Pause. Yes, operator. That word was police. What else? This is, after all, a life special. The Red Shark was out on Fremont where I had left it. I drove around to the garage and checked it in. Dr. Gonzo's car, no problem. And if any of your men fall idle, we can use a total wax job before morning. Yes, of course. Just build the room. My attorney was in the bathtub when I returned, submerged in green water. The oily product of some Japanese bath salts he'd picked up in the hotel gift shop, along with a new AM/FM radio plugged into the electric razor socket. Top volume, some gibberish by a thing called Three Dog Night, about a frog named Jeremiah who wanted joy to the world. First linen, now this, I thought. Next we'll have Glenn Campbell screaming, "Where have all the flowers gone?" Where indeed? No flowers in this town. Only carnivorous plants. I turned the volume down and noticed a hunk of chewed up white paper beside the radio. My attorney seemed not to notice the sound change. He was lost in a fog of green steam. Only half his head was visible above the waterline. "You ate this?" I asked, holding up the white pad. He ignored me, but I knew. He would be very difficult to reach for the next 6 hours. The whole blotter was chewed up. "Evil son of a bitch," I said. "Better hope there's some Thorazine in that bag, because if there's not, you're in bad trouble tomorrow." "Music," he snarled. "Turn it up. Put that tape on." "What tape?" "The new one. It's right there." I picked up the radio and noticed that it was also a tape recorder. One of those things with a cassette unit built in. And the tape, surrealistic pillow, needed only to be flipped over. It had already gone through side one, a volume that must have been audible in every room within a radius of 100 yards, walls and all. "White Rabbit," he said. "I want a rising sound." "You're doomed," I said. "I'm leaving here in 2 hours, and they're going to come up here and beat the mortal shit out of you with big saps, right there in the tub." "I'd dig my own graves," he said. "Green water and White Rabbit. Put it on. Don't make me use this." His arm lashed out of the water, the hunting knife gripped in his fist. "Jesus," I muttered. At that point, I figured he was beyond help, lying there in the tub with a head full of acid, and the sharpest knife I've ever seen, totally incapable of reason, demanding the White Rabbit. This is it, I thought. I've gone as far as I can with this waterhead. This time it's a suicide trip. This time he wants it. He's ready. "Okay," I said, turning the tape over and pushing the play button. "Do me one last favor, will you? Can you give me 2 hours? That's all I ask. Just 2 hours to sleep before tomorrow. I suspect it's going to be a very difficult day." "Of course," he said. "I'm your attorney. I'll give you all the time you need. At my normal rates, $45 an hour. But you'll be wanting a cushion, so why don't you just lay one of those $100 bills down there beside the radio and fuck off." "How about a check?" I said. "On the Sawtooth National Bank. You won't need any ID to cash it there. They know me." "Whatever's right," he said, beginning to jerk with the music. The bathroom was like the inside of a huge defective woofer. Heinous vibrations. Overwhelming sound. The floor was full of water. I moved the radio as far from the tub as it would go, then I left and closed the door behind me. Within seconds he was shouting at me. "Help! You bastard! I need help!" I rushed back inside, thinking he'd sliced off an ear by accident. But no, I was reaching across the bathroom toward the white Formica shelf where the radio sat. "I want that fucking radio," he snarled. I grabbed it away from his hand. "You fool," I said. Get back in that tub. Get away from that goddamn radio. I shoved it back from his hand. The volume was so far up that it was hard to know what was playing unless you knew Surrealistic Pillow almost note for note, which I did at the time. So I knew that White Rabbit had finished. The peak had come and gone. But my attorney, it seemed, had not made it. He wanted more. Back the tape up, he yelled. I needed it again. His eyes were full of craziness now, unable to focus. He seemed on the verge of some awful psychic orgasm. Let it roll, he screamed. Just as high as the fucker can go. And when it comes to that fantastic note where the rabbit bites its own head off, I want you to throw that fucking radio into the tub with me. I stared at him, keeping a firm grip on the radio. Not me, I said finally. I'd be happy to ram a goddamn 440-volt cattle prod in that tub with you right now, but not in this radio. It would blast you straight through the wall, stone dead in 10 seconds, I laughed. Shit, they'd make me explain it, drag me down to some rotten coroner's inquest, and grill me about, yes, the exact details. I don't need that. Bullshit, he screamed. Just tell them I wanted to get higher. I thought for a moment. Okay, I said finally. You're right. This is probably the only solution. I picked up the tape/radio, which was still plugged in, and held it over the tub. Just let me make sure I have it all lined up, I said. You want me to throw this thing into the tub when White Rabbit peaks? Is that it? He fell back in the water and smiled gratefully. Fuck yes, he said. I was beginning to think I was going to have to go out and get one of the goddamn maids to do it. Don't worry, I said. Are you ready? I hit the play button, and White Rabbit started building again. Almost immediately, he began to howl and moan. Another fast run up that mountain, and thinking, this time, that he would finally get over the top. His eyes were gripped shut, and only his head and both kneecaps poked up through the oily green water. I let the song build while I snorted through the pile of fat, ripe grapefruit next to the basin. The biggest one of the lot weighed almost 2 pounds. I got a good Vita Blue fastball grip on the fucker, and just as White Rabbit peaked, I lashed it into the tub like a cannonball. My attorney screamed crazily, thrashing around in the tub like a shark after meat, churning water all over the floor, and struggled to get hold of something. I jerked the AC cord out of the tape radio and moved out of the bathtub very quickly. The machine kept on playing, but now it was back on its own harmless battery power. I could hear the beat cooling down as I moved across the room to my kit bag and fetched up the mace can, just as my attorney ripped the bathroom door open and started out. His eyes were still confused. He was waving the blade out in front of him like a man who meant to cut something. Mace, I shouted. You want this? I waved the mace bomb in front of his watery eyes. He stopped. You bastard, he hissed. You'd do that, wouldn't you? I laughed, still waving the bomb at him. Why worry? You'll like it. Shit, there's nothing in the world like a mace. Hi, 45 minutes on your knees with dry heaves, gasping for breath. It'll calm you right down. He stared in my general direction, trying to focus. You cheap, hawky son of a bitch, he muttered. You'd do it, wouldn't you? Why not, I said. Hell, just a minute ago you were asking me to kill you, and now you want to kill me. What I should do, goddammit, is call the police. He sagged. The cops? I nodded. Yeah, there's no chance I wouldn't dare go to sleep with you. Yeah, there's no choice. I wouldn't dare go to sleep with you wandering around in this condition, with the head full of acid and wanting to slice me up with that goddamn knife. He rolled his eyes for a moment, then tried to smile. Who said anything about slicing you up, he mumbled. I just wanted to carve a little Z in your forehead. Nothing serious. He shrugged and reached for a cigarette on the top of the TV set. I menaced him again with the mace can. Get back in that tub, I said. Eat some Reds and try to calm down. Smoke some grass. Shoot some smack. Shit. Do whatever you have to do. Just let me get some rest. He shrugged and smiled distractedly, as if everything I'd said made perfect sense. Hell yes, he said very earnestly. You really need some sleep. You have to work tomorrow. He shook his head sadly and turned back toward the bathroom. God damn, what a bummer. He waved me off. Try to rest, he said. Don't let me keep you up. I nodded and watched him shuffle back into the bathroom, still holding the blade. But now he seemed unaware of it. The acid had shifted gears on him. The next phase will probably be one of those hellishly intense introspection nightmares. 4 hours or so of catatonic despair. Nothing physical, nothing dangerous. I watched the door close behind him. Then I quietly slid a heavy, sharp-angled chair up in the front of the bathroom knob and put the mace can beside the alarm clock. The room was very quiet. I walked over to the TV set and threw it onto a dead channel. White noise at maximum decibels. A fine sound for sleeping. Powerful, continuous hiss to drown out everything strange.